Colonel Emma Brooks walks into a small supermarket on a peaceful weekend afternoon in Austin, Texas. Wearing a casual white shirt, blue jeans, and sneakers, she easily blends in with a crowd of ordinary customers. With a humble appearance, no one could have expected that this woman had spent her entire career defending the country, commanding hundreds of soldiers on the battlefield. Emma enjoys quiet moments, picking out essential items by herself after a long, stressful day. But not long after, that peace was broken by a seemingly harmless act that revealed the true nature of a human being. At the end of the aisle, a tall man in a police uniform, Officer Paul Smith, accidentally dropped a packet of noodles and a bottle of soft drink on the floor. Emma paused, watching as Paul glanced at the mess and then walked away casually, leaving behind the mess he had caused. As a soldier, Emma is trained to pay attention to detail and stay accountable in everything she does. Paul's sloppy actions and indifferent attitude made it impossible for her to remain silent. Emma stepped forward, her voice calm but clear. "I'm sorry, sir, you just dropped a few things. Maybe you should pick them up so as not to inconvenience others." Instead of apologizing, Paul turned his cold gaze on Emma as if she didn't deserve attention. With a disdainful smile, he replied, "Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? I don't have time to worry about trivial matters." Tell me what you think I'm going to do. I don't have time to worry about trivial matters. In the face of that arrogant attitude, Emma remained calm. Her eyes lit up with seriousness as she replied, "As a police officer, you have a responsibility to set an example for the community. Picking up my things is not only polite, but also showing respect to everyone." But Emma's words did not make Paul aware of his responsibility. Instead, he became sarcastic, continuing to attack with offensive words. From a small act, the atmosphere in the supermarket had now become tense. The crowd began to pay attention to the confrontation. Emma could clearly feel the curious, shy eyes from all around, but she stood upright, facing Paul's challenge, ready to defend her point of view despite any prejudice or offensive words. Osman glanced at Emma again, his eyes full of contempt. He stood there, tall and complacent, with no intention of following her advice. In her heart, Emma felt a surge of anger. But with the bravery of a seasoned army officer, she controlled her emotions brilliantly. Her years on the battlefield had taught her that calmness and decisiveness can solve the most stressful situations. And she took a deep breath, keeping a calm but no less firm voice. "Sir, this is not just a small matter," she said. He was wearing a police uniform, and everyone here was looking at him. Doing an act as simple as picking up something is not only a citizen's responsibility, but also a way of representing his profession. Her words were a warning, but instead of listening, Paul smirked, a laugh full of mockery and arrogance. "Listen," he said, his voice full of sarcasm. "You seem to think you know a lot about the responsibilities of a policeman, but you don't really know anything. This is not worth worrying about, and to be honest, you should take care of your own affairs." Emma sensed the curious gazes from the people around her. Some people had started pulling out their phones to film the scene, but she didn't let it distract her. In her heart, she was angry, not only at Paul's irresponsibility, but also at the injustice she and many others had suffered. This insult was not just a personal matter. It represented a larger portion of the social prejudices she had fought to overcome throughout her career. Emma remained still, unflinching. Her eyes gleamed with determination as she looked directly at Paul. "You're judging the wrong person," she said, her voice soft but full of power. "You may not realize it, but the way you behave now will have consequences. Not only for me, but also for you." Paul smirked, not believing her words, but behind Emma's calm exterior, anger and steadfastness were simmering. She knew that this was not just a small argument, but a moment for her to stand up for herself and the values she had always believed in. In the face of Paul's defiant attitude and insulting words, Emma felt anger rise in her heart, but she did not allow it to overwhelm her. Her eyes were cold as she looked directly at him, not flinching in the slightest. Paul still stood there with a sarcastic smile and eyes full of contempt, as if he was waiting for Emma to get out of control. But instead of responding with anger, she chose to use the reason and bravery of a seasoned commander. "I'm not here to argue," Emma said, her voice calm but authoritative. I just want to remind you that your actions not only affect others, but also reflect who you are as a police officer. You should know your responsibilities better than anyone else. Emma's sharp words made the surrounding crowd begin to pay more attention. Some people stopped shopping altogether to watch the developments. Paul, feeling himself pushed into a miserable position by the eyes falling on him, decided to use arrogance to hide his embarrassment. He laughed, the sound echoing in the small aisle of the supermarket. Mm. Responsibility? Paul smirked, his voice full of sarcasm. Who are you that dares to explain to me? Just a mediocre woman? Nothing more? Nothing less? Don't think you have the right to stand here and tell me what to do? You don't understand anything about my work. Paul's sexist and racist rhetoric was a powerful blow to Emma's self-esteem, but instead of letting her emotions dominate, she took a deep breath, keeping her eyes steadfast. She knew full well that all her actions at that time could be a testament to the difference between her and Paul, a true leader versus an abuse of power. I don't need you to understand who I am, Emma replied, her voice calm but weighty. But I want you to understand that anyone in this society deserves to be treated with respect. And if you can't do that, then you're the one who doesn't deserve the uniform you're wearing. Paul laughed louder, his laughter filled with challenge and contempt. What do you think you can do to me? I'm a policeman, and the law is on my side, he said. And you're just an ordinary woman of color. You should know your position before you get into trouble yourself. Paul's words were not only an insult, but also a challenge. However, Emma didn't flinch. She felt the tense silence that enveloped the entire supermarket, everyone's eyes watching her every gesture. This was no longer a personal argument. This was a moment for her to prove that calmness and steadfastness always triumph over arrogance and prejudice. Emma stood upright, her shoulders stiff as if she were facing an enemy on the battlefield and not a man in a police uniform. Her eyes lit up with steadfastness, unwavering. Though Paul's words were full of mockery and insults, the surrounding crowd began to quiet down as if they were holding their breath, waiting to see her next move. She took a step forward, not afraid at all. Her voice was calm, but sharp as a blade. You can think of me as anyone, she said, but remember that arrogance and contempt for others do not hide your moral shortcomings. I'm not here to fight for power with you, but I'm not going to let you continue to abuse it. Paul frowned, his confidence beginning to crack at Emma's decisive demeanor. He looked at her, trying to look for a sign of insecurity or fear, but all he saw was a woman as solid as a bronze statue. The crowd was now fully attentive to the confrontation, with some even holding up their phones to record every moment. Don't be noble in front of me, Paul snarled, trying to regain control of the situation. You're nothing but a troublemaker. If I want, I can kick you out of here right away. Emma didn't smile, but the corners of her mouth twitched slightly, an expression of frightening calmness. If you think your power allows you to behave like that, then I will let the law answer that you were wrong to think that I would be afraid. The atmosphere in the supermarket was frozen, and the tension increased when the two stood face to face. Paul, with a large and aggressive appearance, facing Emma, a woman who is not tall, does not wear a uniform, but her demeanor and eyes exude undeniable authority. You may continue to insult me, Emma said, her voice calm but weighty, but remember that I'm not here alone. Here, there are a lot of witnesses. And if you think you can use words to put me down, you're wrong. I am not standing here to defend my personal honor, she continued. I stand here to defend the values that I have spent my life preserving. The whole supermarket seemed to be in absolute silence. The crowd, although no one dared to speak, through their eyes, Emma knew that everyone was on her side. Paul, while still maintaining a tough appearance, could not hide his embarrassment when he realized that the situation was spiraling out of his control. Emma remained steadfast, like a beacon of steadfastness in the midst of a storm of injustice and prejudice. In the face of a tense situation when Paul began to lose control, Emma remained surprisingly calm. Under the scrutiny and sometimes fear of the crowd, she understood that her every action and word at that time not only affected herself, but also proved justice and righteousness. Paul took a step forward, his voice becoming harder and more aggressive. I warn you, don't make the situation worse. I'm the police, and I have the right to deal with you right here. His words rang out, but instead of frightening Emma, it only added to the determination in her. Emma slowly pulled the phone out of her pocket, not in a panic, but in a decisive manner, as if she had planned it in advance. You have your rights, she said, her voice soft but sharp as steel. And I have my rights too. Let us see on whose side the law will be. She dialed a number quickly, her voice calm when the call was connected. Hello, I need support right at the Central Supermarket. There is a police officer who is abusing his power and threatening people. I need the competent staff to come here immediately. Paul was stunned. His eyes widened when he realized that the situation was now out of his control. The crowd began to whisper loudly, and some people stopped recording videos to call the authorities. Emma, despite standing in the midst of chaos, maintained a calm demeanor. What do you think you're doing? Paul roared, taking another step towards Emma, but she didn't back down. Her eyes looked directly at him without a hint of fear. I'm doing what you're supposed to be doing, she said, her voice firm but not high-pitched. Defending fairness and responsibility. At that moment, police car sirens sounded outside, signaling that help had arrived. The crowd dispersed to give way as the officers entered. Emma slowly pointed her hand at Paul, her gaze not leaving him. This is the person you need to consider. All of his actions have been documented and fully witnessed. Paul, who had now lost his arrogance, began to feel embarrassed. The confidence that once radiated on his face now turned into a guilty unease. Emma's actions not only highlighted the dangers of abuse of power, but also set an example for everyone that justice and responsibility should always come first. As the authorities took control of the situation, Emma stood quietly watching Paul being escorted out. Her expression was calm, but her heart was filled with deep satisfaction. That a small act of courage and justice could create a ripple effect and send a powerful message that inequality and prejudice have no place in a society that values equality and respect. The story of Colonel Emma Brooks will continue to be told as a testament to the strength of character and unwavering commitment to fairness and justice.